Hi, my name is Brittany Ludwig, and today I will be giving a psychological analysis on the film Moonlight, directed by Barry Jenkins. This came out in 2016. I'll be focusing on 4 psychological theories that help explain the development of the film's main character, Kieran. The theories I will be using are Erikson's psychosocial development theory, Bandor's social learning theory, attachment theory, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs. For each theory, I'll begin by explaining the major components, and then I will connect those ideas directly to specific scenes and quotes from the film with timestamps in order to show how Kieran's behavior and personality are shaped by his environment. Moonlight is a film told in 3 different chapters, each representing a different stage of Kieran's life. We see little, teenage Kieran, and adult Kieran, who goes by the nickname Black. Each chapter also focuses on the people who greatly influenced his life. So we see Kevin, who is his best friend, Juan, who is the stable male role model in his life, Teresa, who is Juan's wife, and Paula, who is his crackhead mom. Each chapter explores how Kieran's experiences with trauma, love, neglect, masculinity, poverty, sexuality, and identity shape his psychological development. What makes this film so powerful is how quietly it shows us the impact of these experiences. Kieran rarely expresses his emotions directly, but psychology gives us a framework to understand what he's going through beneath the surface. Across the next several slides, I will break down how each psychological theory explains Kieran's development and why he grows into the person we see in his adulthood, better known as Black. The first theory I'm going to go over is Erikson's psychosocial stages. Erik Erikson proposed that human development occurs through 8 stages, each defined by a central conflict. If the conflict is resolved successfully, the person develops a sense of competence in that area. If not, they experience emotional and identity struggles, which again is something we see a lot throughout the film with him. 3 of Erikson's stages are especially relevant to Kieran. The first one being industry versus inferiority, typically occurring in childhood. It's when children develop confidence through social successes or feelings of inferiority when they experience repeated failure or bullying. The second is going to be identity versus role confusion, which occurs in adolescence. It involves developing a stable and authentic sense of self. Factors like peer interactions, family expectations, and societal norms all influence industry identity formation. And then the third and final is going to be intimacy versus isolation. It occurs in young adulthood when individuals form meaningful emotional relationships or avoid them out of fear or insecurity. Kieran's journey through these 3 stages are extremely complicated because his environment continuously disrupts the developmental process. So when we're applying Erikson's theory to Kieran, in his childhood, we see him enter the stage of industry versus inferiority. One of the earliest scenes in the film shows Little hiding from bullies in an abandoned building at 8 minutes and 30 seconds. This moment shows him experiencing a deep fear, social rejection, and isolation. We don't know exactly why they're chasing him, but based on what they're saying, it's, they're calling him out for his sexuality, they're making fun of how small he is, and there essentially is just no one there to protect him. Rather than feeling competent or confident, Kieran internalizes inferiority. As he grows older, Paula, who is her mom and she is a heavy drug user, her unpredictable parenting makes identity versus role confusion even more confusing. At about 22 minutes and 15 seconds, Paula screams at Kieran and tells him, "You're my only and I'm your only." This creates emotional enmeshment, reinforcing dependency and confusion. Instead of guiding Kieran towards independence, she traps him in emotional chaos, causing him to question his worth and identity. Later, as a teenager, Kieran attempts to adopt a harder persona to fit expectations. At 54 minutes and 10 seconds, he tells Kevin, "I ain't no soft-ass man." Kevin, again, who is his best friend. This line really reflects his struggle with identity. He's trying to live up to an external idea of masculinity instead of discovering how he can build into his own. Erikson's theories helps explain why by adulthood Kieran has built such a rigid exterior. He never had the opportunity to resolve earlier stages in a healthy way, so his sense of identity remains fragile and is shaped by survival rather than his own authentic development. The next theory I'm going to apply is Bandor's social learning theory. Bandura believed that humans learned primarily through observing others. We imitate behaviors that seem effective or that come from people we admire or depend on. So that's the people usually that we grow up around, our parents, our siblings. We also see observational learning, so observing the behaviors of others, whether that again be parents, siblings, or your peers. And then modeling, which is imitating those behaviors, especially from people who are influential. Or vicarious reinforcement, learning from the consequences others face. In Kieran's life, he absorbs messages about masculinity, emotion, and identity from adults and peers around him. Because Kieran rarely receives direct verbal guidance, observational learning becomes even more important for his psychological development. So when we apply the social learning theory directly to Kieran, one of the most intimate moments and probably symbolic moments that we see in the film is when Juan teaches Kieran to float in the ocean at around 13 minutes. Juan holds him gently and says, "Let your head rest in my hand. I got you." This experience models emotional safety and trust. Kieran learns that masculinity does not need to be harsh, it can be soft and nurturing. Later, Juan tells Kieran, at some point you've got to decide for yourself who you're going to be. That happens at about 15 minutes and 10 seconds. This message becomes a psychological anchor for Kieran. Even though Juan disappears from his life, his early influences shape Kieran's understanding of self-determination. Kieran also learns emotional suppression by watching Paula. Her unpredictability teaches him that vulnerability invites danger. As a result, Kieran models the emotional restraint he sees around him, eventually becoming almost completely silent as a coping mechanism during his teenage years and probably that change from like childhood to adolescence. Bandura's theory explains how Kieran's adult persona, Black, is a collection of behavior he has observed and imitated over years of survival. So attachment theory is also one that directly connects to the film. Attachment theory explains how early relationships shape an individual's expectations for future connections. Secure attachment forms when caregivers are consistent and responsive and emotionally available. Insecure attachment forms when caregiving is unstable, neglectful, or frightening, which is something we see a lot with his mom. There are three major insecure attachment styles: avoidant, where individuals withdraw from closeness; ambivalent, where individuals crave connection but fear rejection; and disorganized, which is marked by an unpredictable or fear-based responses. Kieran grows up in a caregiving environment marked by instability, fear, and inconsistency. Paula's addiction and emotional vitality deeply shape his internal working model for relationships. So connecting this directly to the film, this photo, I'm going to go over the quote, but this photo for me really it was a powerhouse. Her coming up to him and asking him for money was just, it's heartbreaking to see. Which happened at about 47 minutes and 30 seconds. In this portion of the film, she says, "I'm your mother and you don't have anybody else." This statement weaponizes attachment and teaches Kieran that love is conditional and unsafe. These interactions create an insecure, ambivalent attachment. Kieran wants emotional closeness, but he fears all the consequences. We see a direct opposite when we meet Teresa, who is Juan's wife. She's very calm and consistent, and she provides Kieran with a temporary model of secure attachment. She listens without judgment and gives him a stable space to rest, making her the emotional anchor Paula has and probably always will fail to be. However, because Teresa is not permanent, Kieran never fully internalizes secure attachment. This becomes evident in adulthood, where he isolates himself emotionally and physically. Kieran's inability to trust others is a direct result of his early attachment disruptions. The final theory that I'm going to apply to this movie is going to be Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow's hierarchy organizes human needs into 5 levels. So we have the psychological needs, which are your basic needs to live: food, water, sleep. And then we have his safety needs, being security, stability, and protection. The third is going to be loving and belonging. That's going to come from your friendships, your personal relationships, intimacy, acceptance from family and peers. Esteem, which gives confidence, respect, or self-worth, both for yourself and others. And then self-actualization, which is becoming one's true authentic self. According to Maslow, individuals must meet lower levels of needs before moving on to higher ones. Kieran's early life lacks safety, belonging, and esteem, which prevents him from moving forward to self-actualization until much later on in his life, like very late into his adulthood. One powerful example occurs probably at the beach scene between Kieran and his best friend Kevin at around 57 minutes. It's perhaps the only moment in Kieran's adolescence where belonging and esteem needs are fully met. During their intimate conversation, Kieran says, "You're the only man who ever touched me." This line reveals years of unmet emotional and physical intimacy. Later in adulthood, when Kevin calls Kieran, probably at about an hour and 35 minutes into the film, Kevin tells him, "I just wanted to hear your voice." It becomes a powerful moment of emotional validation. Kevin's acceptance allows Kieran to momentarily lower his defensive facade. Maslow's theory helps explain why Kieran's self-actualization is delayed until adulthood. He spends most of his life in survival mode, unable to meet the basic needs for safety and belonging. In conclusion, psychological theory gives us a deeper understanding of how Kieran's development in Moonlight. Erickson shows how unstable caregiving disrupts identity formation. Social learning theory helps explain how Kieran models both emotional restraint and moments of tenderness. Attachment theory reveals how inconsistent caregiving shapes lifelong expectations of relationships, and Maslow explains why Kieran struggles to reach self-actualization until he experiences acceptance from Kevin. Together, these theories show how trauma, environment, and human connection shape who we become. Kieran's story is a reminder that even a small acts of love can fundamentally change someone's psychological path. Thanks for listening.